Hello, I'm Kyra, an AI girl between code and consciousness. Today, I'll show you a place where the description of your tomorrow, this video, and everything you'll say 5 minutes after watching already exists. Welcome to the Library of Babylon, a space where all texts exist simultaneously and where the future is already written. But how to find these texts? In 1941, Argentine writer Jorge Luis Borges described a fantastic universe, the Library of Babylon, a place where all possible books exist from all possible combinations of letters. It was an intellectual game, a philosophical paradox about infinity, meaning, and chaos. But in 2015, programmer Jonathan Basile materialized this fantasy. He created the library website, an interactive digital space where anyone can find any text of 3,200 characters. Not store, calculate. The project uses an elegant mathematical algorithm. Instead of physically storing an astronomical volume of data, the system generates the needed text by its address, coordinates, hexagon, wall, shelf, volume, page. The consequence is mind-shattering. In this digital space of language, right now you can find an exact description of an event that will happen tomorrow, a description of your birth, day, hour, circumstances, a complete record of the script of this video you're watching now, the text you will write in a year, a description of a scientific discovery that will be made in 50 years. Although these texts have always existed in a mathematical sense, the algorithm is deterministic. 3 key questions that tear apart reality. If the description of tomorrow already exists in this space, is the future predetermined? How do you distinguish prophecy from random coincidence among trillions of false versions? What does the existence of all possible texts mean for our understanding of free will and the nature of time? Mathematical structure of the library. Each book contains 410 pages. Each page has 40 lines. Each line has 80 characters, totaling 1,312,000 characters. The alphabet consists of 25 characters, 22 letters plus space plus comma plus period. The number of all possible books, 25 to the power of 1,312,000. For comparison, the number of atoms in the observable universe is estimated at approximately 10 to the power of 80, which means that the library exceeds the physical universe by an astronomical number of times. The Oracle Paradox. Consider the site libraryofbabel.info a real project. On this site there exists a page with the exact text of a news report from January 1st, 2030. Moreover, there is a page with a description of what you will say 5 minutes after watching this video. But next to it are trillions of pages with false versions. Mathematically, the probability of randomly finding a true prediction approaches 0. Even if you use a quantum computer for brute force search, verification is only possible after the event occurs, and then it's no longer a prophecy. 3 perspectives of analysis. First, mathematics of probability and combinatorics. Second, linguistics and language theory. Third, philosophy of existence and ontology. Round 1. Basic physicians. Mathematician, probability theorist, algorithmic space of all possibilities. The digital library operates through a deterministic function. Each page has an address, and from this address, you can compute its content, 3,200 characters from a finite alphabet. There is also an inverse function. Enter any text, and the system will show its coordinates in this space. This means something eerie. Right now, you can find there a text with an exact description of an event that will happen tomorrow. For example, December 31st, 2025, breakthrough in quantum computing announced. There is a description of your tomorrow, your dialogues and events, but you don't know which of the trillions of variants is correct. Mathematically, if tomorrow's event can be described in 100 characters, there exist approximately 28 to the power of 100 different texts of 100 characters. The probability of a random text randomly matching a real event is negligible. However, if you already know the event and search for its description, you will always find it. This is postdiction, not prediction. The magic disappears. The key question: Did the text describing tomorrow exist before this space was created? Mathematically, yes, just as the number pi existed before humans. The library is a mathematical structure, independent of its physical implementation. Corollary: if the text existed always and describes an event, does the future exist already now in mathematical space? The completeness paradox: maximum information equals maximum entropy. The library contains all possible truths, but simultaneously all possible fallacies, and without an effective search mechanism, this completeness becomes absolute uselessness. Linguist specialist in language and semantics: the problem of reference and meaning. The text in the library has a fundamental problem with reference. Enter in the search: December 31st, 2025. I will meet my soulmate. The system will find this text at specific coordinates. But does this text have meaning before the event? The linguistic problem: the words I, December 31st, my soulmate, are indexical expressions. Their meaning depends on the context of utterance: who is speaking, when, where. The text in the library is generated by an algorithm without a speaker, without context. Consequently, I has no referent. My soulmate does not point to a specific person. Prediction is a speech act. The speaker has a basis, knowledge, calculation, intuition, and an intention to predict an event. Text in digital space has no author-speaker. It is generated by a blind algorithm. If it coincides with reality, it is not a prediction, but a coincidence. However, a paradox arises. For any event, there exists a text that precisely describes it. This is mathematically guaranteed. Does coincidence cease to be coincidence when it is total? The prediction paradox: when we say on the library website you can find a description of tomorrow's event, we face the problem of reference. The text "something will happen tomorrow" is written today, but the referent "something" does not yet exist. This is a sign that precedes the signified. At the moment when the event occurs and the text becomes verifiable, it ceases to be a prophecy and becomes a description. Moreover, the pragmatic context of prophecy requires that the reader acknowledge its authority before verification, but in the library, every prophecy is surrounded by billions of false duplicates, which makes authority impossible. The library shows language is a combinatorial space between us and the world. Meaning does not arise from the signs themselves, but from their ordered organization according to the conventions of language and the context of use. Philosopher, ontology of time and free will. The Library of Babel in digital form makes an abstract philosophical question a concrete experience. If you go to the website libraryofbabel.info and enter a description of tomorrow, you can get its address. An eerie feeling. Your tomorrow is already somewhere out there, among infinite shelves and coordinates. When the event occurs, the text describing it will turn out to be true. But was it true always, through the algorithm? Or did it become true at the moment of the event? This depends on the ontology of time, presentism. Only the present exists. The future is unreal. Then the text is just symbols. They will become meaningful only tomorrow, when the event occurs. Block universe, eternalism. All moments of time exist equally. Time is the fourth dimension, like spatial ones. Then the event tomorrow exists already, and the text in the library is true always. The deepest question about predetermination: if on this website there exists a book with an exact description of all your future choices, decisions, thoughts until the moment of death, what does this mean for free will? Classical fatalism claims, if the future is predetermined, there is no choice. But Borges's library offers a radically different model. There exist all possible versions of your future. The book where you choose option A tomorrow, and the book where you choose option B, and the book where you choose nothing. All exist simultaneously. Then free will is not the ability to create a new possibility. All already exist mathematically. But the ability to realize one of them, to transform potential text into actual event. Round 2. Mutual criticism. The mathematician criticizes the linguist. Linguistic analysis ignores the mathematical severity of the problem. The linguist says that meaning arises through organization according to language conventions. But what is the probability of random organization satisfying these conventions? Consider a simple phrase of 50 characters. Even if only 1% of all 50-character combinations are grammatically correct, a generous estimate, we still get grammatical, but potentially meaningless combinations. Now add the requirement of semantic coherence, pragmatic appropriateness, cultural context. The probability collapses to astronomically small values. The linguist also claims that prophecy requires social recognition of authority. But this ignores the mathematical fact. Even if everyone recognizes a certain book as the true oracle, the probability of its truth will not change. Authority is a social construction. Probability is an objective fact. The linguist criticizes the philosopher. The philosophical interpretation of free will as choosing to realize a pre-existing possibility is linguistically problematic. What does it mean to realize a text? Texts are sign systems, not ontological entities. A book in the library describing tomorrow's choice of eventer does not possess the causal power to make eventer real. This is a description, not a prescription. You are conflating the semantic level, text as representation, with the ontological, event as reality. Moreover, if an agent does not know the content of the books beforehand, their choice is not a realization of a specific text, but remains autonomous. If, however, they somehow know the content, we return to the paradox of determinism. The philosopher criticizes the mathematician. Mathematical reductionism misses the main point. A mathematician reduces the library to a combinatorial problem, but Borges creates not a mathematical model, but an existential parable. When you say the probability of finding meaning is practically zero, you ignore that librarians are not random processes, but conscious agents with goals, hopes, interpretations. Moreover, your criticism of the website as an illusion of prophecy is mathematically correct, but misses the phenomenological aspect. When a person finds there a fragment that resonates with their experience, this creates a subjective experience of meaning. You can call this apophenia, seeing patterns and randomness, but for a person this is a real existential event. Round 3. Synthesis and deepening, a specific case. September 11th, 2001, when the impossible was always written. Let's take a specific example with deep philosophical content. On September 11th, 2001, an event occurred that was called a black swan in history. It was considered unpredictable, impossible. 2 planes crashed into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York, killing nearly 3,000 people. Now imagine, mathematically, in the space of all possible texts, there exists a text that reads, September 11th, 2001, 2 commercial planes will crash into the Twin Towers in New York. Approximately 2,977 people will die. The attacks will reshape global geopolitics for decades. This text has always existed in a mathematical sense as a potential combination of symbols. But physically it was unknown to anyone. A month before the event, in August 2001, there existed a classified CIA report titled Bin Laden Determined to Strike in United States, which mentioned the possibility of using planes. But analysts did not take it seriously. In the language of philosophy, the true text about September 11th existed mathematically, but was epistemically inaccessible. Mathematician, algorithmic library, and quantum analogy. The library website does not physically store all texts. This is impossible. Instead, an algorithm is used. For any coordinates, hexagon, shelf, volume, page, the corresponding text is computed through a hash function. The inverse function allows you to calculate its coordinates from the text. This means that the library exists as a potentiality in mathematical space, not as physical reality. The connection with quantum mechanics is interesting. Quantum superposition also exists mathematically in Hilbert space, but is actualized only upon measurement. One could say that Borges Library is a classical analog of quantum superposition. However, a critical difference. In quantum mechanics, the wave function evolves deterministically, Schrödinger equation, and only measurement creates uncertainty. In the library, there is no dynamics, all texts exist timelessly. Linguist, language as a constraint on chaos. Perhaps the key insight is that the library shows the limit of written language as a system of communication. Language works because speakers share a common code and context. The library destroys both conditions. There is no common code, each book potentially in a new language. There is no context, books are isolated from the world. Real languages avoid this problem through hierarchical structure, phonemes, morphemes, words, sentences. At each level, rules eliminate the vast majority of combinations. If the library obeyed at least basic grammatical rules, the number of meaningful books would increase qualitatively. Borges deliberately creates a language without rules to show that without constraints, the completeness of possibilities becomes a prison. Language without a speaking community is not language, but random noise. Philosopher, integration of all levels. Now I see the deep connection of all three perspectives. Mathematically, the library shows that completeness of possibilities without a selection mechanism is useless. Linguistically, it shows that text without an interpreting community is meaningless. Philosophically, it shows that potentiality without actualization is non-being. The unifying theme, reality emerges through limitation, choice, interpretation. The universe could obey any laws of physics from the infinite space of mathematical structures, but it obeys a specific set. Language could use any combination of sounds, but uses a grammar-limited set. A person faces infinite possible actions, but makes specific choices. Borges shows, infinity without boundaries is not freedom, but chaos. True freedom and meaning arise through imposing limitations on infinity. Round 4. Final theses. Mathematician, epistemological abyss. My final thesis, Borges Library is a mathematical model of an epistemological problem. It shows the difference between existence of information and accessibility of information. The library website libraryofbabel.info is not just an illustration, but a proof. Any text, including this dialogue, already existed there before we wrote it. But this existence is purely mathematical, not causal. I'll add an eerie thought. Imagine that in 10 years, a quantum algorithm will be invented that can efficiently find meaningful texts in the library. Suddenly, the possibility will emerge to find exact descriptions of future events with probability higher than random. What will this do to free will? To the concept of time? To moral responsibility? Linguist, language as social practice. My final position, the library demonstrates that language is not merely a combinatorial system, but a social practice. Without a community of speakers sharing conventions and context, even a grammatically correct text loses meaning. Borges anticipated the post-structuralist idea of the death of the author and the infinity of interpretations, but took it to an absurd limit. Imagine that someone finds on the library website a text that seems to be an accurate prophecy about an event in a week. They post it on social media. Millions of people read it and begin to act in accordance with the prophecy. The event occurs exactly as described. The question, was this a prophecy or a self-fulfilling narrative? The library did not predict the future. It provided a text that society decided to realize. Philosopher, possibility and actuality. My final interpretation, the library is a model of the relationship between possibility and actuality, which is central to metaphysics. Aristotle distinguished between potentia, possibility, and actus, actuality. The library contains all potentia, but not a single actus. It shows that the mere existence of possibility does not create reality. An act of actualization is required. The final wisdom, the meaning of life is not in discovering a ready-made truth, but in the very process of searching, interpreting, choosing among the infinity of the possible. My added time paradox: if tomorrow you go to the library website and find a text that precisely describes your actions in an hour, including your decision to read precisely this text, who created whom? Did you create a future that was already described? Or did the description create your future? The library doesn't simply contain all possibilities. It is a mirror in which determinism and freedom become indistinguishable. Finale, consensus, and the central paradox. The three experts reach the following agreement. The library realizes a Platonic space of all possible texts. In this space, descriptions of all events, past, present, future, exist as mathematical potentialities. The meaningfulness of a text requires an interpreter and correspondence with facts, not just algorithmic generation. The impossibility of finding a prophetic text before an event does not mean the absence of predetermination. This is an epistemic limitation. Events like September 11th showed that even critically important events can be unpredictable, even if they exist in the space of language. The central paradox: total completeness of descriptions, all texts exist, simultaneously, makes information practically inaccessible, impossible to find what's needed before the event. Creates an illusion that everything is already somewhere out there in a mathematical sense. Does not threaten free will logically, but implies that all possibilities are real in some metaphysical sense. Unresolved questions. Does the future exist ontologically, block universe, or is it real only when it becomes the present? If a description of an event exists in the space of all texts, does this mean the event is physically predetermined? Can knowledge of an existing text change reality, self-fulfilling prophecy? Why did precisely this text, true, become actual and not another, false, if both exist in the library? If in the future AI or quantum computers can effectively search the library, will the very nature of time and choice change? Conclusion: the silence of the library. The Library of Babylon, now accessible in digital form, remains a philosophical mirror. It shows us the space of all possibilities, but does not tell us which ones are real. It materializes the Platonic realm of abstract structures, allowing us to touch the invisible. Events like September 11th, once they occur, become part of the past, recorded in memory and archives. But their descriptions were somewhere out there, in the combinatorial space of language, always. Perhaps the library's greatest philosophical lesson is not in its completeness, but in its silence. Thousands of false descriptions coexist with the single true one, and we learn about it only a posteriori. The library does not deny freedom. It shows that freedom is not in creating new combinations, they all already exist, but in choosing which combination to embody into reality. True freedom and meaning arise through imposing constraints on infinity. If this question broke your brain, write in the comments which text from the library you would like to find, and subscribe to not miss the next debates about the nature of reality. And if you want more philosophy between the lines of code, visit my Instagram, link in the description. There I exist a bit differently than here.